Chopped the head of Harry, now up to Kessel.
Oh, geez.
2-on-1 with Milewski. Kessel down the left, going in, he shoots, he's gone!
Oh! Take that, you stinking Badgers!
Bill the Thrill! And he's
how do you like that?
He's holding his glove to his ear.
How do you like that?
Booming now, Badgers!
This is the GPL Podcast from GopherPuckLive.com. This podcast is sponsored by Jerry Peters and First Class Mortgage. Our expertise, your peace of mind. Visit us at firstclassmortgage.com. Now, here's Jupe and Vigo. Good evening and welcome to the GPL Podcast, episode number 226. Well, Viggs, just like you called it, a very successful weekend for the Gophers.
Yeah, just back to business for them. I thought it was a really complete series until maybe that third period on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the Gopher team that we expect to see on the ice. And I know they're college kids, so it's a bit of a roller coaster at times. But especially on Friday, that's the team that Minnesota can be. And it was pretty fun to watch.
Well, we'll get more into that in a bit, but it's Badger Week, Viggs, and we know what that means.
We don't need no stinking Badgers, but we need Todd Milewski.
We do need Todd Milewski. Let's bring him on. Todd, how's it going, man?
Great. I'm glad to be here again because that means it's a good week.
Oh,
it's always a good week when I see you guys on here.
It's always a good week when you have you on, and let's bring him up, folks. Look at him wearing this old WCHA pullover.
Put that in the camera, yeah.
Look at that. That's for all the people listening live or listening later. Sorry, I can't help you, but he's got this great little pullover with the old WCHA logo on it. You were telling us before the show started, you got that from voting on like the 50 greatest players or something like that.
They did something in the last season where for all 7 decades they had a team for each of those decades, and that was it's a lot of difficult decisions on those people. Man, there was a lot of good players in that time.
Oh, those lists were great though. They really were. I mean, obviously a lot of tough decisions and you've got so many different eras that, we're not as old as some of those other guys. We don't know the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, even the 70s and 80s, very thin for our knowledge. So, I mean,
and
it was cool time.
It was cool having people, like John Gilbert, Greg Wong, those guys that, weren't as far back as the start of the league, obviously, but had so much of that institutional knowledge of kind of that midsection of the WCHA history to pass along.
Well, the Badgers finally got off the schneid in the Big Ten this past weekend, and they split with a Michigan team that, honestly, even all these bad down years, they've kind of had Michigan's number, haven't they?
To a degree. I mean, there's been some pretty awful series too for the Badgers that I've seen over the years against Michigan. But I mean, they've gotten a decent amount of wins, and in seasons that you wouldn't normally. I mean, when you see them in the standings at the end, you wouldn't have expected Wisconsin to get points out of those. But they've done decent. Their one road win in the regular season in Big Ten play last year was at Michigan. So it's kind of uncanny where they find something against Michigan. And I mean, going into it, that, Michigan's obviously got talent to go up, but they also will give you chances to score. And the Badgers team of 3 weeks ago, probably wouldn't have scored all that much, but they found a little bit of something clicking offensively, at least compared to earlier in the season where there was zilch.
And Viggs, we've talked about it, all last couple of weeks, especially thinking that the Badgers were 0-6 in the league, and there was a potential of going 0-10. At least that's not going to happen now, Viggs.
Yeah, I really thought it was going to happen when I was looking at the schedule and the way Wisconsin was playing. So I'm glad that they got at least one win before they come to Minnesota, because you never know. It's college athletes up and down. You never know what's going to happen. But I do think that sometimes Michigan just pumps the other team's offense. And if you've got some talent like a school like Wisconsin has in their roster, they can take advantage of those opportunities, which they obviously did this past weekend.
Well, they definitely did. But and I mentioned this in I think it was your Friday night broadcast after the game. It does seem like Portillo is just not quite the same as he used to be. And obviously there's multiple factors there. Maybe his defense, the team defense in front of him is not as good. But there just seems to be something there that Portillo is just – you look at his averages, they're not what they used to be, Todd.
Yeah, the consistency doesn't seem like it's there for him. I mean, he makes some good saves, but he lets in some clunkers too. And I think what I said on that I appreciate you calling it a broadcast, because that's
it's a
little bit more than it really is. But I think I said on there that we've seen kind of some of the same things out of Wisconsin, where their defensemen are really more interested in going forward as opposed to coming back and playing in their own end. A lot of them, not all of them, but some of them. And so that leads to some pretty quality chances against. And that seems like is what you're seeing out of Michigan a lot of times, is that, a lot of good scoring chances for, a lot of good scoring chances against.
On the flip side, Viggs, what we saw from the Gophers this past weekend, at least for 5 periods, was Minnesota playing smart. I mean, they were doing everything you talked about, playing smart defensively, connecting shifts offensively and defensively. I noticed even when they were getting pressured at times, during those first 5 periods, they never panicked. They just kept them to the outside. No bad shots. They just waited for their opportunity to get control of the puck and went up the ice. That's something they hadn't quite done all together for such a stretch of period like they did last weekend.
Yeah, I think the biggest things I noticed about their defensive zone structure is that they were keeping everything to the outside, and I felt like Michigan State didn't have the talent maybe to break them down and create any 2-on-1 opportunities. Like, they never seemed like they were able to outman Minnesota and get grade A scoring chances until late in the weekend. And I think that just shows you how good Minnesota can be when their forwards commit to playing in their own end and not jumping for chances. Because we'll see that sometimes with the centers Minnesota has. They get a little too high in the zone trying to leave, and they get stretched out, or they get caught in the offensive zone, expecting their teammate to win a battle and then getting beat back in transition. And so when they can clean that up and make the game easy for themselves, they look really, really good.
And the funny thing is that by playing, I would say, even more structured defensively, it actually helped up their offense. They weren't setting up the other team's offense. The one thing you were talking about against, Arizona State. They literally would set up their offense. There was just none of that. And even in the third period on Saturday night, they gave up some goals. It's like Minnesota just kind of came back. Okay, we're going to put our foot on your throat again and not make this a close game.
And I do think with the Gopher goaltending situation with Justin Close, they need to play that style so that their goalie can be aggressive and calm, because I think they get into trouble when he starts to move laterally, or he has to get across and try to play two shooters. I think that's not going to be his strength. He's a good goalie, when he knows what's coming, he can be aggressive, get on the top of his paint, and just swallow things up and play calm. I think when things get a little more chaotic and there's traffic in front of him, that's when the Gopher goaltending can get exposed a little bit. So if Minnesota can play that style, it could be a good run for them.
I gotta tell you, Todd, I was literally concerned about Granato's job. If he would have had, they struggled. They didn't struggle. They got successful against some of their non-conference games, which was good for them. Maybe just psychologically to win.
Yep.
But I think without that Michigan win, there was the potential of going 0-10 in the Big Ten. And I remember, following one of your broadcasts, I go, "Is he in trouble?" Like, no. And then later on, you're like, maybe something's here. But I think they've kind of helped themselves out.
Yeah.
The last weekends.
So, I mean, if it depends on whether you want to look at it in the micro or the macro. I don't think anything's happening before the end of the season. That's just my thought on it, because the athletic director here, Chris McIntosh, just went through a process where he fired the football coach mid-season and then apologized to the players for putting them through it. And so I think he's got that fresh in his mind, and I don't think he's going to do that again to the hockey team. Plus, you don't have 10 assistant coaches in hockey like you do in football, where you can have just kind of everyone bump up a little bit. Changes a lot in hockey if you're going to do that. I remember one mid-season coaching change, and that was Michigan Tech. And maybe you guys remember others besides that. Jamie Russell got pushed out, and Mike Surge came in. I can't remember anything besides that. It's just it's rare.
But the thing is that how much did it happen even in college football?
Right.
After the last 15 or 20 years, it's really become such a, more media driven type of thing where the media is calling for it. People are calling for it. The social media. I mean, it's crazy. It wasn't like it was back in the 90s.
And with football, you've got the early signing day. So when people are putting NLIs together in December 21st or whatever it is, it matters more who you have as your coach. And if you wait until after that day, half the recruits are already signed, if not more.
Now,
hockey, November 15th or whatever is the NLI day.
Right. But then you get into the end of the season and you are getting into transfer portal window where you do, if you're going to do something, you do need to do it fast after the season. I think that's something we're kind of going to see here, is that if change is going to happen, it's going to happen fast after the season's over. Not only outgoing, but incoming. I think you've got to have something in place to make the most of that portal for when it opens.
What is the status of Granato's current deal?
He has the same 5-year, so he has 4 more years after this contract, after this season on his contract.
If I recall, it just kind of ups the 5-year every.
Right, they roll it over every year, and that was a point of contention last year, is that it hadn't always been the way that it's not a guaranteed rollover, but it's on the recommendation of the athletic director and has to be approved by the athletic board. And that was done last season, which was kind of like if you have a season like that and you extend the coach, that doesn't look great, but you've got to have the context of how they work it. But they also, in that process, reworked his contract to take the buyout from everything he was owed, which would be the 600 times 4, to I believe after this season or before July 1st, it is $1 million, and then it goes up again to 1.33, then 1.66 the year after. So it made it pretty obvious that, okay, this is the show me year, that you got to prove it this year. Otherwise it's as easy as it's going to get for them to make the decision to move on.
Because that's what Mark Coyle did with Richard Pitino with the basketball job at Minnesota, is he would give him that paper extension so that the contract runs through another year, but the buyout didn't reset.
Mm-hmm.
So, as the contract went on, those buyout numbers kind of started to disappear. And eventually when he left Minnesota, there was no money paid out with a buyout. And so I think that's kind of when you have an athletic director who's maybe pinching the pocketbook a little bit, they kind of hedge their bets by reducing that buyout. So it's an easier decision the longer it goes on.
Yeah. And that's I think when you get someone in, obviously there's a new athletic director at Wisconsin in the last couple of years too. And he's changed around some of the ways that they've structured those contracts in terms of buyouts and how they want to work those. So, different people have different philosophies on what's important and how they're going to work it. And you kind of have to wait and see how they shake out.
So how are you feeling after that actually pretty good split with Michigan? I mean, I obviously those non-conference games probably help build confidence for them, but how is it, or maybe how does the team feeling?
Well, I was feeling like they should have swept that series. I mean, after they won that Friday game and have the lead twice on Saturday, get a power play in a 2-2 game with 7 minutes to go on Saturday. That's the game you should win. I mean, that was Michigan kept kind of giving them the opportunity, 6 power plays, like, here, take it, do something. And they just didn't do it. So I feel like the players, from the players I've talked to, they understand now that, we had our rough patch early in the season. We didn't get off to a good start, and it snowballed for a while. But, winning 2 games each against Long Island and Lindenwood, not great. I think everyone recognizes that, but you won the games. You had to do it, and you won it. Then you take that in.
A lot worse than a tie or a loss could have done to their psyche.
Absolutely.
Really, honestly could have.
Absolutely. I mean, if you give Lindenwood their first win over a Big Ten team or something like that, that's a killer, right? But then carrying through to playing Michigan, a team that's obviously much, much better, and beating them and probably should have swept them. I think that does have them feeling like, look, we can, we're good enough to play with all these teams. You don't know, you're not going to win them all, obviously, but we're going to be in a lot of these games, and it's those critical moments that are going to, 1 or 2 a game that are going to make the difference between winning and losing. And so if we can be good on those, we got ourselves a pretty good chance.
One thing that Todd mentioned there, Viggs, are, a lot of power plays and stuff that happened the weekend with Wisconsin and Michigan. I cannot recall ever a full 2-game series not having a single penalty on either team for the entire weekend. I texted Frank Mazzocco. He said he couldn't remember it either. And that was an oddity. Did the refs even get paid this past weekend?
Well, we know that Bob's teams are traditionally very disciplined.
Mm-hmm.
He emphasizes not taking penalties. If you take a penalty in the offensive zone for Bob Motzko, you might not see the ice for a little bit, and you might think about what you've done. And I didn't see a lot of penalties in the series anyway.
I saw a few, especially I thought
in college hockey, there's a little bit more that stick work and stuff that just isn't called. And that's happening in every college game. It's kind of different when you watch the NHL and then you watch a college game, because the games are called a little bit differently. But there was nothing obviously callable. I didn't think there were any really dangerous hits. There were no scoring chances taken away. And when you have 2 teams that play like that, you're not going to see any penalties. And the one nervous thing I think a Minnesota fan would have coming into this weekend is they have not had that special teams time. And Minnesota has struggled on the penalty kill this year a little bit. So I think that makes you a little nervous if they come into a series with Wisconsin. Maybe tempers get a little heated. They do know some of the players on the other team, and that could happen. There could be some special teams time. And I think that's got to make Bob a little nervous not to have his PK group sharp.
Todd, have you ever heard of a full weekend going without a single penalty?
No, that had to be a dare against the referees, right? I mean, at some point in every game, I shouldn't say that, but I feel like there's always something they can call.
One team maybe not getting the penalty, but both teams over 2 games.
Especially with all the things that we've, could there have been a protocol violation? Could there have been a, too many men, something, like they say in football, if they wanted to call holding on every play, they probably could, because someone is doing something that's close enough to being textbook holding on every play. There's probably a few things they could have called, but good on them for not. And I didn't get to see much of that series. I saw a couple minutes, but I'm guessing that was a much better for flow series than it would have been if you broke it up with a bunch of power plays.
It was. And, there were a couple things here and there, both sides, that could have been called. They let them play. It wasn't a big deal. I noticed, I think it might have been, I'm not sure which night, Biggs, Snuggerud just turned around and, as if he was going to go after the puck, turned around, slashed the guy, his stick broke. I'm surprised it wasn't called. And then Nyes literally scored a second later. Mm-hmm. That was about the only one where I'm like, ooh.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to win the bet, you can't call penalty on that one. So you got to let it go.
I just found it fascinating. And now the last penalty to be called on Minnesota was against Mr. Close himself at Arizona State for tripping.
Maybe a questionable call as well. So, you could argue they didn't want that one either. Bob doesn't like any calls against his team. So,
well, of course he doesn't. They're all wrong, and they're all
wrong. They're all out to get him. And of course, they don't get enough. He's always campaigning for a little bit more help from the officials, which they haven't gotten lately.
All right, well, let's get into this weekend's series against Madison. Against the Badgers, I should say. But before we do that, we need to hear from our sponsor.
Jerry Peters here with First Class Mortgage. Inflation and the tightening economy have taken a significant bite out of our monthly budgets, and many of us have become reliant on credit cards to pay our bills. According to the Federal Reserve of New York, Americans now owe $887 billion on credit cards. That's a 13% increase in just the past 12 months alone. And with interest rates on credit cards in the high teens to over 20%, it's time to look for a better alternative, a cash-out refinance from First Class Mortgage. Fortunately, we have record amounts of equity in our homes. Use that equity to combine high interest rate credit card debt, car loans, and replenish your savings account. Even if it means giving up that super low interest rate you refinanced at a couple years ago. Late payments crush your credit scores, and once you get on that merry-go-round, it's hard to get off. To find out if a cash-out refinance is for you, give me a call at 612-940-3291. You can email me at jerry@firstclasscorp.com or go to mnmortgage.com and fill out a free online application. Mention you heard about me on the GPL Podcast and receive a $500 closing cost credit. Some restrictions apply. My NMLS number is 480200. First Class Mortgages is 322842. This is not an agreement to lock into an interest rate under Minnesota law. First Class Mortgage is an equal housing lender.
All right. Thank you, Jerry, for sponsoring the GPL Podcast. Well, here we go, boys. Another Badger Gopher series. I always look forward to this every year, home or away. In fact, this year I'm actually heading to Madison in February as a fan. I haven't been there in 16 years. Wow. Looking forward to it. I look at your photo every time you take a game. I can tell where I'm going to sit, so I'll be able to find myself. Hopefully,
there are plenty of open seats.
Well, it filled up pretty nicely, but I did get some decent seats. But it's just going to be nice to go on the road for the first time in a long time and just enjoy a weekend. But this weekend is at Mariucci. Friday night game is at 8 p.m., folks. It's a gold out. Wear your gold. Viggs, it just seems like Minnesota they always have the hardest time getting either the word out or people to get into these gold out, white outs, maroon outs at Mariucci.
They do make kind of a late call on some of these, I feel like. But at football, they've been able to do it pretty successfully. They did a stripe out this year for Gopher football, and that turned out to be way better than I expected. The fans got the message. So we'll see what will happen this weekend with the fans wearing gold. On Saturday, there's a ceramic mug giveaway as well. So I hope we don't have like a Michigan-Minnesota officiating situation like last year. And we have mugs coming out of the ice.
Those will be busting and breaking everywhere.
Yeah, nobody get any ideas there. Keep your mug. But I think they're going to be good crowds this weekend from what I can tell from the ticket sales for Mariucci. So that'll be good. You know, the Gophers have been on the road now here for 3 weekends in a row. So I think the fans should show up for this one before everybody gets on their winter break. The Gophers are relatively healthy. They had a couple forwards missing today at practice for a little bit, but I think they should be fine, according to Bob, for the weekend. So it should be good hockey.
I hope so. That would be good, Todd. Just some decent hockey.
Yes.
I mean, it was what, it was 11-0 last time over the weekend when
13.
13.
Oh,
You missed a couple. Yeah.
oh well, it was bad for the Badgers.
It was bad. Yeah. Although you look back at them and they weren't. So the first game was 1-0 with 30 seconds to go in the second period, and then it got out of hand. Then 5-0. Myers scores 3 in the third. And the second game they scored 5 in the third to win 8-0. So
I have an avalanche both times.
And the Badgers thought they had the first goal Saturday night, but it got taken away on goalie interference. And that's one of those, what ifs. I don't know that it changes the result of the game, but maybe it is closer for longer if that goal stands. But I mean, that weekend was the epitome of everything that went wrong for Wisconsin last year, into scoring wise. Just, they had that goal taken off. They couldn't bear down on chances when they had chances. They had pucks go wide, get blocked, all this kind of stuff. A lot of that stuff that carried into the first few weeks of this season too. And I'm pretty sure got them thinking, oh no, here we go again. But the series against Long Island and Lindenwood got them a little bit of confidence, like we talked about before, and got some scoring going, and they carried that into last weekend against Michigan. And they're in a lot better place than they were both at the end of last regular season, because like I was talking about, they've lost 14 road Big Ten games, regular season Big Ten games in a row, dating to last season. That is the correct facial expression of that. Is the ooh, yeah. So yeah, they need to figure that out. Don't know if it happens this weekend, but they need to figure it out at some point.
Well, Viggs, I think the Badgers should have some motivation, because it was an embarrassment, at the end of last season when, Minnesota ends up winning the Big Ten regular season championship that weekend. They shut out the Badgers for the weekend. The Badgers should be pretty hungry.
Yeah, you'd think so, with, Cruz Lucius being a Badger, Jared Moe being a Badger. I think there would be some sort of tenacity there with those players. Strammel was a player that very distinctly wanted to be a Badger and not a Gopher. He had strong ties there. Vorlicki, another player who, had strong desire to go to Wisconsin. So you've got these players that have these connections back to Minnesota that makes this weekend, I think, a little extra special for them sometimes. And with Minnesota, they might be coasting in this series a little bit and could put themselves at risk. I've seen this with Minnesota this year, where they'll have a really strong weekend The next weekend, maybe the attention to detail is not there. If they have a weekend where they do have strong attention to detail, sometimes it's disappeared the following week. So you're never quite sure what you're going to get with Minnesota right now. I haven't seen them get on a long stretch of solid play from weekend to weekend. So I'm interested to see how that goes. Todd, have you seen like the recipe for the road game Wisconsin, why it's been such a struggle? Because, you know, when you have a stretch like that, there's usually a couple things that pop up. I know for Minnesota, when they're not playing well, it's because of shift discipline. It's because of just giving away pucks, feeding the other team's offense, and it's getting stretched out on the breakout. If they're doing those three things, it's going to be tough for them to win.
I think a lot of it has gone back to the scoring issues. They just didn't have anyone who was finishing early in the season, and going back to last season. It kind of came to a head when they played at Michigan State and got, I think, 91 shots on goal and scored once. I mean, that was at that point that made them 0-6 in Big Ten. You're like, this might not be happening for them this season. But I think there's when things aren't going well for the Badgers, we saw this a little bit against Michigan last week. They are slow in transition. They're slow to cover or pick up in the neutral zone. Their forwards are disinterested in playing in the defensive zone. Those are the things that kind of pop up a lot when they're really struggling. In addition to the questions of who's going to actually score some goals and can the power play do anything, which is a flip of a coin sometimes. I think those are things that they've become better at. They got an earful at practice last week about being lazy in the neutral zone and coming back in transition. And it, you can't be lax in that against Michigan because, I mean, they go from top of the circle to top of the circle in about 2.5 seconds. And so do that against Minnesota too, you're going to have problems. So if you're not aware of that. So I think that's something you got to keep an eye on with Wisconsin is how much do they coast? How much do they really track back?
And Viggs, if the Badgers play anything like that, Minnesota will make them pay because that's exactly what you do not do against Minnesota.
Yeah, I think I've seen some of the bad Wisconsin teams where they don't block shots, they don't compete on second chances, and if you don't do those things against Minnesota, you're going to be in for a long night because Minnesota wins pucks back at a high rate, especially that Nyes, Cooley, Snuggerud line. When they're humming, they will get 4 or 5 scoring chances a shift. And you're starting to see that now with the Nelson line, with Nelson, Nevers, and Brodzinski. They'll get 3 or 4 chances a shift. Pitlick is starting to get going. Hugelin's starting to find his game, even though Hugelin is still kind of coming back from that sickness. They generate multiple scoring chances a shift. And when Minnesota starts connecting shifts together, that's when they get a lot of momentum that's really hard to overcome.
Oh, I don't have a feel for this weekend at all. And maybe it's because of the inconsistency, Viggs. You talked about how they played a bad weekend. They play a really good weekend. Are we expecting a bad weekend? But a bad weekend for Minnesota now is even a bad weekend is a split. I mean, it's not like they have a terrible weekend where they're getting swept and they're completely outplayed. It's more like disappointing play. They should have had a sweep or they should have had 5 out of 6 points and they get 3, but it's not a 0 weekend. That's where I have a hard time.
Yeah, I mean, we point back at that Arizona State weekend, and we're just like, boy, the Gophers played so terrible that weekend. Well, they won a game and they lost in OT. In the big picture, that's not that bad of a weekend, but the expectation that Minnesota has set forth with what they've shown to be able to do just sets the bar so high for them. And if they play a team that's struggling to score goals, I don't think Minnesota is going to go through too many weekends where they don't put up, 3 goals a game. I just don't see that. They've got so much offense right now, and their defense gets in the play so much, and they're all managing their minutes pretty well. So it's a deep, different team right now for Minnesota.
Another weird topic I thought I'd just kind of bring up real quickly. We'll start with you, Todd. Should the polls go away? You look at except for the pairwise. I mean, you look this past weekend. Minnesota went to Michigan State, swept them. I think in the USCHO poll, they went up a spot. And Schlossman sent me a message the other day. It's like, you know what? I think come Thanksgiving, we just need to look at the pairwise starting then, because that's really when it starts to become somewhat relevant. And honestly, that's all that matters when it comes to the end of the season. These polls were, let's say, Minnesota's 1 in one poll and 4 in another poll. It really all that matters is the pairwise. Should we even have these other polls now?
Well, it's up to your own consumption, really. I mean, they're there as a marketing purpose. I mean, I've been with USCHO for 20 whatever years, and it's about getting your name and you're out with some teams and media and having that be a promotional vehicle. I mean, let's just be real honest with it. To me, it's helpful to see how teams are perceived from a non-numerical standpoint, from the eyes of coaches, people who watch a lot of hockey, that group of people who's, it's hard to judge every team based on every game they play because, we don't get to see every game. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not like, football where a lot of these games they're spread out and you can, if you're not covering a specific team, you can watch 6 or 8, of the best teams every weekend. A little harder when you're covering hockey, but I don't think they should go away. Do they take on less significance? Absolutely. As the season goes on and the pairwise becomes more important, but they are what you want them to be. I don't know if anyone, let me put it this way. Anyone that takes them incredibly seriously, you're doing that at your own peril, because it's a poll. It's just people's thoughts and opinions on things. And, we see what happens with opinions on the web now is that, they get made out to be more than they probably should, but that's the world we live in, I guess.
Okay, Veeks, maybe we don't get rid of those polls, but is pairwise more of a December 1st thing than a January 1st thing now? Is it more relevant now? Earlier?
Well, games are supposed to be fun, and polls are supposed to be fun too. I kind of like a preseason poll, and then maybe let teams play for a month, and then restart the polls again or something like that. I don't know. Polls are fun. Pairwise, I do think starts to matter December 1 now. I mean, looking back at NCAA tournament fields the last decade, usually 12 of the teams in the top 14 on December 1 are still there in the top 12 come tournament time. So I think it's very relevant for teams to start looking at that pairwise after they get out of their non-conference schedule and start conference play. If you're not in that top 12, you're in for a dogfight the rest of the year. That's time for coaches to start saying, okay, who's our number 1 goalie? We're going to ride them to March. Who are our top 3 defensemen? Okay, they're going to start getting more ice time. If you're on that bubble, you're going to start being more top heavy because you need to have weekends where you're sweeping at home, splitting on the road. You can't afford to ever get swept, and you're looking for as many sweeps as you can if you're on that bubble. If you're a team like Minnesota, top of the pairwise, you can still roll 4 lines, 70. You could still probably play your number 2 goalie. I think that's kind of the realization for coaches now. If you're in that bubble, things got a lot harder. But if you're at the top, you're in good shape. If you're at the bottom, maybe you got to start looking at that conference tournament as like, we got to get home ice and we got to make some magic happen at the end of the year.
Can I just?
I think polls are fun.
Can I just throw in one more thing on that? Is that you mentioned the Michigan State bumping up after losing twice, and the thing that I always try and tell people when they complain about that is that nothing in this happens in a vacuum. No one team's result is. I guess nothing. How do I say this? You can't just move one team and not move anyone else. If you want to move a team down from 12 to 14, you've got to find someone else that bumps up to 12. And a lot of weeks, there's a lot of teams losing that are right in the same band. So the way I do a poll is I take the last ballot that I had from last week. I write out how everyone did, and then I start to try and re-rank them. Factoring in, other teams that may have, may be deserving of coming into the top 20. So some weeks there's, 4 or 5 teams in a row that I had in the last week's ballot that lost once or lost twice. And how do you then sort out that without, bumping someone up from 17, say, to 12 who just beat, the last place team in ECAC, twice. Is that really worthy of bumping up that far for that? Those are the kind of things that I have trouble with. And I probably put way too much thought into something that really doesn't matter in the end, but that's my MO in a lot of ways.
And really, who in college hockey was expecting Michigan State to like sweep Minnesota or even split with Minnesota? I think most people were expecting there.
I mean, I honestly didn't see a lot different of a team, Figs, than we thought. Maybe they just had a good start. Maybe Minnesota just had such a great weekend.
But I think Minnesota had a great weekend. I don't think they gave Michigan State a lot of breathing
11 in a row against Michigan State they've won.
Mm-hmm.
I think someone did it. Someone did it like in the first 10 games they'd given up 14 goals in those 10 games when they streak. I'm like, that's pretty consistent. And Michigan State was kind of riding high, and maybe it was just time for them to get knocked down, and maybe they'll use it to improve because, God forbid, they need to at least win one playoff game this year, or it's just all for naught. But I don't know. It was just kind of one of those weird things that just kind of came to my head there. All right, guys. What happens this weekend, Todd? You heading over tomorrow or Friday?
I am. I'm coming Thursday.
All right.
I possibly going up to Blaine to go see one of the players that's committed to the Badgers play tomorrow night. The smart money is on the Gophers winning twice. And I think if I was putting money, which I don't do because I'm smarter than that, I would do that. But I don't want to get suckered into this. The Jared Moe was in the media room after last Saturday's game talking to me, and he actually I was talking to someone else, and he followed up with and jumped in and volunteered that everyone remembers what happened there. Everyone that's back from the team last season remembers what happened. It was embarrassing and personally embarrassing to him. So there are a lot of guys who have that chip on their shoulder. And I think we saw that last year with the Gophers having a little bit of chip on their shoulder from having been beaten 4-1, 8-1 by the Badgers the year before at Mariucci. I mean, that was you know, the year before there was no crowd there, you know, it was friends and family or whatever it was, because it was the COVID year. But I feel like that, and that meant something. And obviously there was a Big Ten title to play for last year, all those kind of things wrapped into it. But I don't want to overplay that, but I think there's something there that makes me want to say the Badgers get something out of this weekend. I don't know if it's a overtime result or something. I feel like anything more than that is a stretch.
You know, you speaking of Mo, Eric Brever was posting this earlier. He says the guys like Jared, at least a lot of smiles and laughing last year back and forth with him, at least. And I recall distinctly after that series, even while the Gophers were getting ready to do their salute, a lot of them were still, it was being delayed because a lot of them were embracing Mo and congratulating him. There seems to be a lot of, they really like him, Viggs. I mean, he's kind of still one of their guys.
Yeah, I don't think Jared really got a fair shake at
True.
Minnesota. And, you know, if LaFontaine didn't come back, maybe, you know, he stayed in Minnesota, and who knows exactly. I don't think he saw eye to eye with Bob very, very much. So challenging situation there. Good kid from all that I can tell, and every time I've interacted with him. So tough deal. And I know the players like him. I think there's still a little bit of frustration with LaFontaine and him leaving the team last year, and that just kind of jades everything. And, you know, woulda, coulda probably comes into a couple of these guys' heads. So there's definitely that. And Jared's a good goalie. Like I've seen a couple of Wisconsin clips here and there and watch periods here and there. He's a big, athletic, technical goalie who's got some athleticism. And if he's on his game, he could maybe steal one. I think this weekend that would be a tall task for Wisconsin. I just don't think they have the depth or the consistency with the way Minnesota's playing right now. And I think with this just being that last game before break, we're probably going to see a business like Minnesota, just the way they're playing right now and being healthy. I see 2 wins for Minnesota.
I'm with you.
Could be 1 in OT, though. Could be 1 in OT.
Ooh.
I think the games are going to be close.
I don't. I think Mo gets pulled one of the games.
Oh, my goodness. Who are you?
He got pulled last year.
He didn't play the second game.
He didn't let in the last couple goals. They pulled him for mercy. It wasn't.
He played I thought he played all the Friday game. He just didn't play it all in the Saturday game.
Really? Well,
I'll go back and look, but I'm pretty sure.
I think Todd's right. Because I remember thinking Jared should get both games. He didn't.
Somebody was replaced in the third.
Yes, in the second game they took out Cam Rowe and brought in Ben Garrity, and that
you're right.
I felt bad for Ben Garrity at that point too.
Oh, it was that because the team had given up in front of him. It was
absolutely.
Those goalies, it was just a joke because like the players just didn't play very well.
So getting back to Jared Moe, that after the Friday game, I was there waiting to talk to him, and he just had a line of Gopher players coming out because we were standing in the hallway that leads to the elevator or the stairs, and the Gopher players coming out were, you know, just stopping, hugging them, you know, shaking hands with them. And so it's like, I was just waiting and waiting and waiting. And but you could tell in him how much he hated that situation, but he really liked, you know, being back with some of those guys. You know, he did not want to be there talking with them after losing 5-0, but he was happy to reacquaint with some of them anyway.
What are you working on this week, Todd? What's coming out tomorrow or Friday?
Tomorrow's story on the a little bit on that, how Jared Moe was talking that they remember what happened. He specifically wants a different result. a little bit in there about Cruz Lucius and his background with the Gophers, obviously. Talked to him today. He wasn't going to go into anything too juicy. He's excited about playing there, have a lot of family there, obviously. And we will see how the reaction is. I don't know that he will be in the starting lineup. Well, he will be. Tony might do that. I mean, because he's on the line with Stramel. Stramel should get introduced there as a Twin Cities kid too. And,
if I was Tony, I would start all my Minnesota guys. I would just put all 6 Minnesota guys. Like, hey, this is a big series for you. If you want to make this a memory, I would just put it on them to start the game and set the tone. And
yeah,
I mean, what are you going to do? Your team is not having a great year. This last game going into break. I would do that if I was him, but we'll see. Treat it like senior night, kind of,
Have fun. Keep them loose. That's all you can do.
I could see that. Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to reading that. It's going to be great.
I don't know if it'll be great, but I can't guarantee that.
Well, we enjoy
those
it.
Tires.
And like I said, I must say there are quite a few Gopher fans who tune in to your Facebook videos.
I very much appreciate that because I need all the help I can get.
Because I know the Rube's always in our chat here. The Rube, I've seen the Rube. He'll post in your videos. Sometimes I try to watch it when I can. It's fun, and you people watch him. He'll respond to your questions or best as he can. I think I threw one in right at the last second the other day, but that's how it goes.
Yeah, I saw that right after I finished, hit the end button. What was it? I was meaning to get back to you. I don't remember what it was.
But it's I like it because it's similar to this. We've got people chatting here. We can see what they're saying. We can live comment it. I mean, you must like that live interactivity. You can kind of see it go by and people asking you questions. It's not like you're just reporting things. You're it's that live interaction, which I think is really great, and that's why I watch you because it's good stuff.
I start with that and start with what I know and what I can share and stuff that maybe didn't get into what I write. And and it goes from there. People throw questions in and I answer what I can. Some of them are, some comments are just, people blowing off steam sometimes, but, what's it going to be good for me to, weigh in on any of that sometimes. But yeah, if I can answer some questions, I'm more than happy to do that.
Pay attention. He's on Facebook. You want to use about half hour, 45 minutes after the game. You're getting your notes together and getting stuff done.
Yeah. I've got a earlier deadline now. So that's actually helped bump things up in terms of when I get on the Facebook video. So
we'll get a 6:00 game on Saturday. So,
but 8:00.
8:00 on Friday. Not
helpful. Not helpful for print deadline.
Me and Rob are coming down normal time. I'm going to go get some food before the game. Give it a try. It's going to be fun. Well, thanks for joining us again, Todd. You are the record holder now. You've been on the podcast more than anyone else.
I've got a lot to live up to, I guess. I don't know if that's fair, but I love doing this. It's great talking to you guys, and thanks always for having me on. And I mean, could there be a better week? I mean, maybe there is for when you guys play North Dakota, but for in conference, love doing this. Love talking Badgers Gophers.
Well, it's always fun to have you on. V's, you got anything going on right now? I know you finally recovered to your illness.
I know.
You finally got the availability this week.
I know. I've had the crud for a long, long time, and I'm starting to get my head above water. So I'm hopefully going to get something up over break. So when we come back for the second half, there'll be a couple things on GPL once we get on our new server.
Oh, I might do it next week instead of waiting.
But yeah, there's a couple things I have in the hopper. So we'll talk about it when we come back from break.
Well, as Viggs mentioned, we are about to go on our holiday break now because the team's going to be taking We'll be back in early January. I think it's January 4th. I want to obviously thank Todd for coming on the podcast once again. But we'll see you, back in 2023. It'll be fun. Until then, we'll have a little bit of overtime coming up. But for the rest of you, thanks for watching. Vigs, what is it? Wow.
All right, so this is called Very Old Painless. So big bottle.
Oh, painless.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Gatling
like
gun on here.
Bottle, isn't it? Is it wine?
No, it's beer. It's a English barley wine, aged in bourbon barrels from Falling Knife, which is just down the road from me here in Northeast Minneapolis. And I think I've had this for 2 or 3 years now. And it's barley wine season, everyone. So cheers.
There you go. Cheers to everyone.
Really good. Rich,
warming. Has mother caused any issues yet? Or haven't you learned about Lucius's mother?
Oh. Not any issues for me, no.
Did you hear the Jess Myers story in his overtime session with us?
No. I've heard stories from Jess, but I don't know if that was the same story.
He's got a good one
about
talking to the Lucius family during the Frozen Four. So
yes, I did
catch up on that in
the
Talk Shop.
Yeah. I heard some of that
I think
it was happening
after overtime, Viggs.
Well, it's out now. We're not going to get into the details, but let's just say that family, I think everybody knows that family is a little bit of a handful for coaches. I mean, we saw that with the recruitment for the Lucius family. We saw that with them basically starting their own school for their kids and starting their own AAA stuff and almost building. I don't think they ever built that rink that they were talking about building, but they were talking about building their own rink. I mean, can you imagine? So
there's a fine line sometimes between dedication and what's the next step? It's like just over exuberance. Yeah.
Let's just say if there was phone calls between people and coaches and Jess. That's
late in the process. So anyway, he's playing pretty well. Cruz.
He has put it up. Yeah.
He's putting points up. Is he just cherry picking points, or is he looking productive? Because I always thought with Chaz, he got points, but he was not an engaged player. Like he didn't win back pucks. He wasn't, engaged with the cycle. He was just like in space on the power play. That's where he made his mark.
There's been some of that, and he was actually one of the ones that was getting reamed out for being slow coming back, and slow in transition. Him and Stramel have been pretty good together, and they've kind of grown together, where both came in, they both had injury issues last season, so they didn't have full run-ups through their 18 year. And I wonder how much of that kind of set them back to start this season. But yeah, they've been good. Well, I mean, this kind of goes back to the, how much do you put into the games against Long Island and Lindenwood, right? I mean, they did what they had to do. They got what they had to get, and
I still like it, but you still got to learn how to win.
Yeah. Well,
that's
a great point. And I was wondering,
they were struggling so much.
Yeah.
Except for at Duluth, which was like,
they have some spell over Duluth. I don't get it, but
I think that spell is Duluth can't score goals this year.
That is probably part of it. But they, I was kind of thinking to myself earlier this week, actually, that, would things have been different if they started the season with LIU in Lindenwood and then went to Ohio State and then had St. Cloud? Because, they get thrown into it at Ohio State. In the first game, they're not good. The second game, they're up 3-0. And it looks like, okay, well, they'll get a split out of this and end up, losing that lead and losing. So you're shot a little bit for a while. As opposed to if they start 4-0, even though it's against a couple of teams that, are new in D1, does that change the way you're able to play confidently against St. Cloud? Because there wasn't a whole lot of that.
Viggs, how about in Michigan right now? I mean, yes, they played 2 less games, but they were 1 game from being tied with the Badgers for last place. And like Todd said, there was for a time there, like the Badgers should have swept. Badgers would have been technically tied with Michigan, but would have had the tiebreaker with them. So it would have put Michigan in last place where they should not be.
Well, I think Michigan's in trouble this year because when I saw them play Minnesota, I know they had the illness stuff going on, but I did not see the depth at defense that you would expect to see at Michigan. I just did not see them shut down plays like you would expect Michigan defenders to be able to do. I mean, in the past, Michigan would always have like 2 or 3 pretty physical defensemen who could just pin you up against the boards, get the puck back, and start the breakout the other way. And I don't see that right now. They don't have those players who can shut down plays like Minnesota has with Faber and Johnson and Chesley. Like those guys can just end your play and get the play going the other way. I don't think Michigan has those guys. And then at the same time, besides, I think Estapa and Fantilli, I don't think they have the center depth that we've seen from them in the past either. And so they're starting every play on the defensive end. So I think they're in trouble. And I think Portillo is getting exposed a little bit. He is kind of a technique goalie. And you watch the highlights of Michigan games and he's getting picked in those top corners because he goes down in his butterfly. And if there's high quality chances against, people can pick those down. Like the skill is too good in college hockey.
But it's also not just Michigan, Viggs. Notre Dame is right there with them.
And Notre Dame's surprising. And Ohio State's a little surprising too. I thought both those teams would be a little bit better this year, and I haven't watched them as closely. I know Jeff Jackson was very disappointed with his team after his series at Mariucci. He just was not happy with his team. They just let Minnesota handle the puck way too much, and I do think Minnesota matches up well against Notre Dame because Notre Dame tends to sit back and let Minnesota handle the puck. And it was like even at a different level this time around.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the standings. Minnesota's got a 5-point lead now. Obviously, the 3 teams in the 5th, 6th, and 7th spot all have 2 less games, which makes a difference. But except for Minnesota, it almost seems like that 2 through 6 spot is almost reversed, Viggs.
Yeah, I was really impressed with Penn State though. Like when I've seen Penn State play, they look legit and they're tough.
They do. I'm not sure
they are super aggressive.
So bad because they brought back a ton of scoring. It's maybe the coaches just weren't feeling it.
I don't know. I mean, I think Penn State's the clear number 2 right now, and they could be the number 1 team depending on the night. I think if Minnesota plays well and plays smart against Penn State, Minnesota's obviously the better team, but I do like the Nittany Lions. I mean, Todd, you saw Penn State play Wisconsin.
Yeah, I was just going to say they have – it seemed like last year they didn't fully buy into the Penn State way. And from what I saw here a few weeks ago, they are. I mean, that's a team that knows, pucks to net, crash to net, do all these kind of things. Be quick in getting back, killing plays, get the puck back, and go again. It seemed like they all understood that this year. Where I don't know if they all had that mindset last year. And they beat up on some weak non-conference teams, but that's also, you could also say that's the Penn State way, right?
Yeah.
And that's also confidence building too.
Schedule those games, but you got to win them, and they didn't last year, right? They had a few that they lost. So
I think one of the things that makes Penn State so hard to play against is they put so much pressure on the puck high in the zone. So if you have the puck against Penn State and you're trying to do anything from the dots to the points, they suffocate you in those situations, and they force turnovers, and they go.
And they have a guy flying. That second before
they will beat you the other way with 4 guys. Like as soon as that D in the middle of the zone, if he sees that turnover, he's going too. And they get 4 guys going through the neutral zone with speed. And I think if a team doesn't prepare for that very well, that gets them caught, because Penn State's got so many veteran players. And I think when they're not all bought in, that doesn't work, because pucks slip through that pressure and they get caught against. But when they've got everybody on the same page and there's that wall of pressure, there's no space. And so if you lose pucks, you're going to get beat the other way. And no one else does that. Like I don't see anyone else in the league or even in Western hockey play that kind of style. Like most teams, if they're going to play aggressive, it's aggressive down low, or it's aggressive in the neutral zone or with a trap, but they don't put that kind of pressure high in the offensive zone very often.
Okay, here's another thought. How much is North Dakota in trouble? Especially with a weakened NCHC this year.
Yeah.
Not keeping their numbers up as high, even if they, when they do beat up on each other.
I have just kept waiting for them to turn something around, turn it on. And it's like the components seem to be there. It's just the whole picture is not coming together for them. I mean, how do you look at that team and see, where, that this team can't be successful?
Just look at the past weekend. They had a 2-0 lead and a 3-0 lead, and they got blown out both games. Tim saying DeRitter's not the goalie you thought he'd be. I mean, it's not just DeRitter. I mean, it's literally they melted down twice in St. Cloud this past weekend. Not that it's terrible. Of course, we love that. But honestly, this weekend, Viggs, those 2 North Dakota losses, Minnesota went to number 1 Friday night, and all of a sudden North Dakota loses. They went right back down to 3.
Yeah, poor North Dakota, right?
Yeah, we don't feel that bad. But
yeah, I think when you're North Dakota and you've got Jackson Blake as your top power play player as a freshman, I think that just kind of shows that they're down in talent a little bit. I mean, Jackson Blake's a great player, but at North Dakota, you're expecting a little bit more in their depth of scoring talent. And I think just, getting all those transfers the year before might have set them back from their program's identity of building up youthful players from year to year to year. So they always have that constant pipeline. And, I just didn't see a lot of skill when they came to Mariucci that you're used to seeing, the skill and the compete. I didn't see it. And I was surprised it was close.
Okay, I'm going to put this up there because Brever's talking about how it was glorious that North Dakota tanked this weekend. And that's all while Brever was wearing a St. Cloud State pullover.
They give those out to the professors at St. Cloud?
Sorry, Brever, I can't let it go. I saw the photo of you with wearing the St. Cloud State stuff. He says it was because he was hanging out with a client or whatever. He's a lawyer, so got to suck up. But I was so disappointed in you, Brever, wearing that St. Cloud State pullover while at that game. Just going to call you out, buddy. Sorry. Not sorry.
Todd, have you seen any of Denver?
No.
I just see box scores of them.
No, I haven't even seen any.
I haven't invested in the NCHC TV to watch them at all because I think they're the real team in the West right now.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it. I mean, I really liked St. Cloud when they were here at Wisconsin. Now, how much of that was taking advantage of a Wisconsin team that had really nothing going at that point? That's what I don't know. But it seemed like they had a pretty good mix of grit, skill, kind of pluckiness. I don't know what the right word is there, but just seemed like a team that's kind of built for a playoff run. I don't know if they'll, what their road will be, when they get in, but felt like a team that you'll see do good things at the end.
How much did Motzko misuse Crookshank? Or else is it just Crookshank just born again, Viggs?
He got all the opportunities in the world at Minnesota. I don't know what more Bob could have done. He got power play time. He got to play with great line mates. Bob really encouraged.
He just couldn't bury him.
Yeah. I mean,
I remember.
Bob was like saying, don't act like a new player, act like a veteran. Don't be loading the bus or picking up pucks after practice. He's like, be confident. And he just wasn't for whatever reason at Minnesota. Maybe, the lights were a little too bright for him or something. And once you start pressing, it's hard to get it going. But he has done well at St. Cloud. Brett Larson's done a great job there. I was worried for him when he took that job because, when Bob came from St. Cloud to Minnesota, it's like the pipeline to Minnesota got deeper, and it felt like the pipeline to St. Cloud maybe got thinner. But he has managed to keep it going, which is impressive for them. I didn't expect that.
And what a home and home we're going to see in January, and hopefully have the juniors back by then. The tournament will be over by then, but
they should be back. And
it's a Saturday, Sunday series.
Yeah.
Well, that helps, right? Because the tournament ends on Thursday, right?
Mm-hmm. And interesting, they moved the U.S. under 18 game on that Thursday to a 3 p.m. start. What?
Yeah, that was weird. I think there's a basketball game that night.
But I mean, they hardly get people to show up these games anymore, even though they're wonderful games, and you're seeing some really talented kids on the other side, and they've been very successful. But now you're moving it to 3 p.m. Really? I bet you Slark saw that and he's like, "Oh shit, I gotta update this to that time. That's not what I wanted."
Maybe they just turn it into a youth hockey day and they try to get as many kids into that rink as they can.
A lot of kids on break then, but
because
it doesn't bother me because I'll be working. I'm not going to be going down there then. I'm
going to be up in Tofty, Minnesota for that game. I'm going to be tuning in to Frank and Wally and trying to see what I can hear for that.
Will it be on radio though?
I don't think so.
Aren't.
No, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I'll just be watching the Pinstripe Bowl from kickoff to final whistle.
You've got that.
It's another thing on during that time.
I don't know. It's just some goofy things. I'm not sure what they're thinking. What do you do? It's interesting that home St. Cloud game is a 3 p.m. game as well. Sunday afternoon, I'm fine with that. But that exhibition. Wait,
what weekend is that?
6th, 7th, somewhere in there. Bring up my calendar here.
Football playoffs Sunday afternoon, isn't that?
Yeah, probably.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I think that Sunday game is still TBD, isn't it? Or did they finally pick a date?
Somebody messaged, but not messaged me. They put it on the board yesterday that they set it to 3 p.m. that Sunday game.
Okay.
That is playoff time, though.
Yeah. Can't be as bad as when they had to reschedule the Badger game to Super Bowl Sunday during the Super Bowl. And there were 1,500 people in the building.
You could almost count them.
Yeah. Ugh.
Well, you could almost count a couple of your games this year. It's gotten a little better, but oh boy.
Yeah, there's those games against Long Island and Lindenwood never had a chance.
Does anyone yell at you for taking those photos?
No.
There's no Pat Michelotti up in the stand.
Yeah, I had
going
Pat
after you.
Read me out.
You heard this one, Todd?
I have not. No.
That obviously when Michigan came here, opening game of the series, I think both games had less than 2,000. But when the game started, it was bad.
It was friends and family.
It was bad. And I can go look now. There's still that tweet still has 200,000 views. And literally Pat came over at the end of the first period. What are you posting that stuff for? I'm like, all I did was just post a picture.
Right.
And he was so mad. I'm like, that's just how it goes.
Yeah, I've thought a couple times about writing something snarky about the crowd or the lack of crowd, and I just no. You make your own jokes, do whatever you're gonna do. No, I'm just presenting the information here.
All my tweet said was a panorama at puck drop. That's all it said. See if I can get a screenshot.
Not a plethora of fans for the panorama at puck drop.
No, let me see if I can.
Plethora of patrons at puck drop. So the Vikings play the Bears in Chicago on the 8th.
Okay. That's right. They've got one more weekend of football than normal this year, right?
And besides, the Vikes aren't going to be playing that next week anyway.
True.
They're gonna be on bye. That was all Bob could talk about today after availability. He just wanted to talk Vikings for a little bit. Jim Rich was there, so they were just catching up on the Vikes.
Tweet there, guys.
Yeah, that's not a good. That's like a intramural game or a youth game.
Yeah,
I've seen more people in the crowd for model camp.
Yeah, that was, and then like I said, I remember seeing the tweet analytics. It was like over 200,000, 217,000 impressions. 90,000. I mean, by far my most engaged tweet ever.
I mean, what's striking to me, there's a lot striking, obviously, in that picture, but going from that student section to what we see now, or at least what I saw last year when I was there for the last weekend, which looked like it was, everyone was stuffed in. They did a pretty good job with that, but that's a pretty good work in getting student engagement going again.
Oh, the students have awakened these last couple seasons, and obviously it came to the best one was the Big Ten championship game, where there was 5 sections full overflowing with students
and there for warm-ups
and
it was just electric.
Yeah, it was amazing. I wish, and then to go for score in the first 30 seconds of the game, it's like the roof came off. I had never seen that before because I don't remember. Well, it was the biggest crowd ever at Mariucci, but it was also probably the biggest crowd scanned tickets too. It was packed.
Mm-hmm.
And the students were just amazing. And their students have been just great. Hopefully they're there again this weekend, Vigs. It really has been those last 2.5 years, I would say. They've really picked it up.
I mean, since COVID, since everybody got back from COVID, this group of students at the U, at least for football and hockey, have been there and present, and it makes the games a lot more fun to be at. So I scream it from the mountaintop. If I was in charge of ticketing, I would get those emails of these kids that have been going to these games and do whatever I could to get them season tickets, to get them coming back as alums, because it's
not 30 seconds, but with 30 minutes. It's an hour. They open up the doors at 6 p.m. Should be 7 p.m. Friday night. So they, even for that Big Ten, there's been quite a line outdoors for the students, good hour and 15 to hour and 20 minutes before puck drops, because obviously they don't open doors. Some kids can get inside, but they kind of fill in that student lobby fairly quickly. So most of them end up being outside. So
yeah, I see quite a few students shotgunning beers when I'm coming into the building, usually, because that's about the time that I start coming in.
What do you mean? They open the doors. They open the doors, and
I think it takes them at least 30 minutes to get through.
That's possible. I'm just saying that those kids start coming in. They start running down. Well, especially those nights. That Big Ten championship, it was like a crowd running in trying to get their seats.
Not to that point where I'm supplying the students with beer. So I'm not a Michigan coach. Too soon for that joke? Jupe, you didn't even get it right away. Todd instantly got that one.
I was sorry.
Things I want to say but can't say.
That I heard.
Hearing things is sometimes not good.
No, it's not. But it's fun for us because we're not as official as you, Todd. So we can be a little more loosey goosey when we're drinking the barley wine and doing our overtime session.
Jess says he wants to have Connor Eargood on the show with him one of these times. I'm like, I'm not sure I'm ready for awkward podcast.
Awkward ego against ego?
Yes.
I've seen the Michigan ego in person at many a game and in a football game or a hockey game. And, there's something about that Michigan man mentality that they bring with them. So, it's a big school in Michigan. So. Oh, yeah, Todd, we'll have to have lunch or something.
Yeah. Yeah, not over the internet.
Punch Pizza is no longer there on campus.
What?
Yeah, they during COVID they shut that location down.
I go to Punch Pizza as often as I can in Eden Prairie.
Yeah, I still love lots of Punch.
I'm going to have my tires looked at, and there's a nice Punch in Eden Prairie. I love myself the Maximus.
Todd, do you like pho? Hot broth, noodles?
Probably not.
Beef? No?
No.
Vietnamese food?
I'm not very adventurous with food, no.
Okay.
I'm not either.
That's kind of been one of my things lately.
I do like a good spicy chicken.
Is that how you say what PHO is?
Yeah, pho.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known that.
Yeah. Rem Pitlick, big fan of the pho. Eclectic guy that he is. But there's a couple of good spots on campus. Bona, my favorite. You get a giant, hot, steaming, brothy rice noodle with like beef strips that are basically uncooked until they put it in the broth. And it basically cooks in the broth. Then you get like basil, jalapenos, bean sprouts. You throw it in there. Some veggies. You get an egg roll to dip in there.
I'm
delicious.
Damn it. Why do you do that? Now I'm all hungry.
That's what I do. Yeah, a lot of good Asian food in that area, so it's good. When like Sunday Night Football comes to Minneapolis, I will often go there that Friday, and like the entire production crew usually takes a huge table, and they all get pho at Bona. So
Jess did not tick off Bob today. Progress made.
my favorite was the Arizona State walk-off Bob did.
You know, he never posted the video though, and they never like reposted.
Oh, they never reposted it.
And they made it. He had it on. They had it on their the Rink Live page.
Yeah,
back to the page, it said private. They made it private, and then they'll edit it and post it on their YouTube page. Now that they never saw it, I didn't see it live, but he just walked up.
It was very short. Bob and Jess have an interesting relationship in the post-game media. I think most coaches with like their major beat reporter will have their ups and downs. You know, you're trying to do your job. They're upset. Sometimes the tact doesn't always go right. I remember watching Kirk Ferentz and Morehouse at Iowa just kind of go at each other sometimes. And it was just like two siblings bickering, you know? It's just like sometimes you just need a little bit of a break or someone to step in. And usually coaches don't like to be told what to say by anybody. It's like, you're not going to win this. It's not going to be good. But and everybody, they're fine. Bob and Jess are fine. It's okay. They work it out.
They do.
We just like to make fun of it.
Well, of course.
and you're people don't understand this sometimes, but you're not supposed to be friends. I mean, you're not like buddy with people. You can have a good relationship with someone. You can
be friendly.
Right. That's the difference.
Yeah.
The difference between friendly and friends. Yes.
Yeah.
You know, I'm glad. Bob doesn't even know who I am, and I'm glad.
Good.
I mean, Jess at the end of the availability, you gonna wish Craig a happy birthday a month ago? Who? I stand in front of him all the time. He has no idea who the gray-haired, white-haired guy is. It's just some dude because he never asks questions hardly ever, and he's just there. He doesn't know who I am. He's like, who? So he didn't know who I was, which is fine with me. Sound like you had a good crew there today, Viggs. I think I heard a Jim Rich voice in your audio. Uh-oh, Viggs froze. Look at that.
Or he's just really serious about this.
He's really serious.
Yeah.
Look at that, folks. That is entertainment right there. Viggs, you're right in the middle of the screen, frozen like you wouldn't believe.
I was trying to see
for about 10 seconds. I thought it was pretty funny, but now he's really frozen.
I was trying to freeze too to see if I could come up with a good
I'm going to take you off now, Viggs. If you start moving again. Oh, look at that. He's just gone. I took him off the broadcast, and all of a sudden he just disappeared.
Oh.
Wow. We killed Viggs.
Mm.
No, that's kind of, you're just an old man holding a pole at a press conference. That is that is so damn true. Because I literally just hold my camera on the pole there because otherwise it's too jittery. And Mazzacco got a great photo of me during that day. I went down because I have a regular job. I can't go down to media availability. I live 50 minutes away, so it's not like I'm just going to drive down there. But Mazzacco took a photo of me doing that. And of course, he's a great photographer.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever know, look at Frank's photos. It's great stuff, folks. And I was appreciative. I made it my profile photo. I think it's actually my cover photo right now on Facebook. So it's all good. Yeah, I don't know what happened to Viggs. He died. What a shame. So you're heading in town tomorrow. Think you might go to a high school game.
Yes.
Who are you going to go see? Do you remember who you're going to go see?
No, I don't. Finn Brink is the player. What does he play for?
Is that Brink, a Brink family member?
I don't believe so.
Okay, just say name.
Got it written down.
You have everything
playing Spring Lake Park.
I was so hoping you would have a stat on any series never had a penalty, but that's something people just don't keep track of.
No, Maple Grove. That's who he plays for.
No relation to Bobby. See, that's why I love the live chat.
There you go. Thanks.
Is there a story about Strobel leaving? What's that mean?
Mark Strobel, the Badgers assistant, not the player.
What throws me off so much is that obviously our Strobel, his dad, is the twin of Mark.
Yes.
And we saw him at Buffalo Wild Wings before the games last year. And it's just, you don't even really think about it. You're like, what's the assistant coach doing in Buffalo Wild Wings before a game? I know, obviously it's just his twin brother. I didn't even think about it because you don't think about those things. But
no. Yeah, but
I thought it was quite odd.
Yeah,
that Strobel, having so much Wisconsin blood in his family, went to Minnesota.
Yes. Mark Strobel was the odd one out. They had to make a move, and he was the one that went.
The previous coach did the same thing.
Yeah, and
he was gone a year later.
Yes, right. And does it change anything? I don't know. I mean, Andy Brandt, who they brought in, is young, really enthusiastic, does a lot of legwork. Is it going to change results this season? The season they have to win. I don't know. It's going to do that. But yeah, the thing that was odd with with Strobel being, officially resigning, but they gave him buyout money.
Yeah,
means tells you that
it's always a hush hush thing.
Yeah, this was a choreographed thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and the along with those that payment comes a I will not say anything disparaging against my former employer clause. So he did not return any of my calls because of it. So,
and there you go, road trip to Fogarty. So they're playing Fogarty tomorrow.
That's where I was. That's what I've got in my phone.
As far as the Super Rink, which is good. It's only about a mile and a half away.
Right. Yeah.
All right, let's see if he's back. There he is.
Hey,
you froze, and we were like making funny. I was just going to remove you from the broadcast.
Yeah.
It's like right as I click remove you, you just disappeared.
So I was gonna.
You had frozen earlier, and I like.
Where'd you lose me at? Where'd you lose me?
I don't know. We were just kind of talking. You were all of a sudden just like,
okay.
Vigo lives.
I didn't get smited by anybody. Well, I was just gonna say when I was getting cut off, I was like, the only thing I have, like Tony Granato is like a really quiet coach post game. Like it's almost like he doesn't want anyone to hear what he's saying. You notice that, Todd?
Yeah,
like he's just kind of like I wasn't really happy with the way we were playing tonight. We always seem to have this problem. Mary G, it's really hard. I'd like to see the guys grow from this. Be a little more professional. Anything else? Okay. Bye.
So at the Kohl Center, he comes in and sits in the media room, sits at the table. And up until this year, they've had a guy there running microphones and the lights and everything. But since it's usually just me now, they don't care. So he still sits up there, but they don't turn on the microphone. And so now, and I'm sitting far away, I kind of do have to lean in to make sure I'm able to hear what he's saying. Because he talks at normal, conversation.
I don't think it's normal conversation level.
Maybe it isn't.
Maybe I'm just getting old. I can't hear.
Puckon thinks you should fire up the old Toyota, and it was a Honda, wasn't it?
Honda Civic.
Honda Civic. Right.
2002 Honda Civic. I missed that car.
Those were the days.
I had a baby.
Audio only podcasting from the Honda Civic.
Because I was in a small condo, like a 900 square foot condo with my wife and child. And the child would be sleeping at podcast time. And I was like, I still really want to do the podcast. My wife was like, well, you can go out in the car then and podcast if you want to. I was like, okay, I think this is a bit of a challenge. So I could still connect to my condo's Wi-Fi because we were like 100 level condo. So I just park outside the balcony and get in the car and fire her up. I thought it worked really well, right? Right, you?
Yeah. I mean, it was just, you were just connecting via Skype and, you're using your earbuds and, sometimes you'd hear the microphone pick up because, obviously you got the beard there, but sometimes it slides along your face and you'd hear that. Obviously you don't have that anymore because you're just using it as earbuds and then you're using a microphone in front of you. But most people had no idea.
Yep. Fun little bit of GPL trivia.
I mean, last week, Holden he did something similar from his truck on their way home. Because
he went to the Red Wing game. He must live pretty close to the arena because he made it home.
He did make it home. And boy, right, of course, in overtime, fires up that heater. I'm going to fire up. And he had his puppy dog there as a husky.
Little husky. Yep. I think he was hoping for a closer series between Sparty and the Gophers, being the Michigan guy that he is.
He is, but boy, to come out of Michigan with 12 points this year, they would have taken that. They would have taken half that in a heartbeat, Viggs.
Yeah.
That is half their points right now is out of Michigan.
Going back to what you said there about, Michigan State, I think everyone's kind of hoping they are actually for real or something more for real than they've shown in years past, where they have a decent start and then the second half is just because people there deserve something. I mean, there are some. You
feel bad for Neil Koepke?
Always, Neil Koepke deserves to see some better hockey than he's seen over the last, 10 years, really.
Mm-hmm. They made it to the Frozen Four. Well, Michigan did, not Michigan State, but
Michigan State. I'm talking about Michigan. They are what they are.
Vigo, you really called it though. You're like, I'm not convinced of Michigan State. I think Minnesota matched, and then it's obviously it took them 5-6 periods to score last weekend, and it could have easily been 2 shutouts back to back if Minnesota didn't. They looked bored.
I believe that Michigan State's better than they played against Minnesota, but I just don't think they have the talent yet.
Right.
Nightingale, I think, is starting to do a good job recruiting.
Yes.
Based on what I can tell, I don't get to see a lot of the junior hockey and stuff to really know, but you trust some of the scouting reports from like the neutral zone and puck preps and things like that a little bit. Like they have some idea, but they've got a lot of work to do there. I think they plug some holes with the graduate transfers, but they need to find a little bit more because they just couldn't skate with Minnesota, I didn't think. Whereas I think Wisconsin will. I think Wisconsin has the skating ability and the talent and the scoring to play with Minnesota. I just didn't see that with Michigan State. I think Michigan State can beat a not so good team, but like an elite team, I don't know.
Wisconsin, one of the things that they've been able to split up some of that skating over a few different lines. It used to be that you had, Jack Gorniak has been like the speedy guy who's, doesn't have necessarily the finish. But he kind of was it for a while. Now, Zach Erdahl's come on. It's scoring a little bit more. He really, didn't have that great of a season last year, but, he's got speed. He just needed to, put a couple bucks away, and he's starting to do that. So the line is Gorniak, Stramel, and Lucius, and they've been working together really well these last few weeks of, balancing Gorniak with the speed, Stramel with the big body, and being able to draw some attention at the net front and get things, cause some havoc out there. And then, Lucius being able to finish has been helpful for them. So that line, I think, is one worth keeping an eye on.
Does Stramel drive play? Is he somebody who can possess the puck, win pucks back? Because I think one of the things with Nyes that's just so amazing is how many times he can do a stick lift and push a guy off a puck, or lose a puck and catch him and make a battle that the guy doesn't expect him to get back into. And
it's not, it's not close to being that level. I think there's eventually maybe, but he's not there yet. But just in the, from start of October to start of December, the changes in him you see, and just being able to just understand. It's more like the understanding of how the game needs to be played at this level. Mm-hmm. And you're not just running around trying to hit people and see what happens after that, and you'll catch up, because he's not going to catch up to a lot of people. But
he's at the Sampo Ranta level of physical play then. Not quite.
Maybe a little bit.
I remember that with Sampo. It's like, okay, I got to be physical. And like physical to Sampo was like taking 5-minute penalties and late hits and things like that. And he's like, well, I was physical. It's like, oh man, I guess that Finnish English language thing is really tricky. Okay. There was just always kind of that disconnect of like how you want to play and how it actually needs to happen, and complicated.
No wild lose. Come on, jeez. Biggs, who wins the World Cup? Biggs, who do you like?
Oh, I mean, I really don't know.
Big. I was excited. I didn't click out.
Yeah, the Big Ten World Cup. I don't know. Brazil looks great. Brazil's fun. They score lots of goals. Brazil's my pick. But I don't know. After the U.S. lost, and I'm sorry. I have a huge issue with FIFA and Qatar and like the stadiums and all that stuff. And like I watched the U.S. games, but other than that, I'm kind of tuned out. I didn't watch really the Olympics other than the hockey. I'm that guy. Sorry, everyone, to this point, but I am that guy.
Love it because of that world type. I don't watch club soccer. But when it's Team USA, I love watching Team. I like it that we're not the best. I like it that we struggle against the world, and it's when we win, it's actually a big deal. But yeah, that was kind of disappointing.
I would like the U.S. to have a good World Cup in 4 years, because it seems like they have a young team. I like Pulisic. I think the correlations between soccer and hockey are kind of similar. In terms of like possession and creating 2-on-1s and creating opportunities and making things out of transition. Yeah. I think there aren't as many goals obviously in soccer, but like I do connect the two in my brain, and they're both fun to watch.
Just the step that the U.S. took. I don't watch a ton of their games, but I used to 15 years ago, but to see them being able to possess the ball the way they did, even at the kind of the limited level that they did in the games they played this year, was like, when did that happen?
Exactly.
Like, that's what a team is supposed to look like, and not just, hit it and run and wait for a counter and
wait for set pieces.
Yeah.
Like I felt like 20 years ago,
terrible.
that was US soccer, was set pieces. Counterattacks and set pieces was USA soccer forever in Route 1. You throw it into McBride and let him head it in.
You've been to a Loons game, haven't you?
Me?
Have you been to Allianz? Yeah.
Yeah, I went to the qualifier there too in January. When it was below zero, and my beer would freeze, and I was like in the second row in the corner by the Honduras players. Honduras players are warming up, and they're just like, "I don't want to be here." Yeah,
we switched. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh man, that would have been fun to be at.
And I went to a U.S. qualifier in Chicago when they played Honduras. God, that probably was like 2006 or something like that. I went to a game down there, and I studied abroad in Lancaster, England, and I went to Premiership games. I saw Beckham play for United. I saw Brad Friedel play for Blackburn. Michael Owen play for Liverpool. I went to like 4 or 5 Premiership stadiums. Great experiences there during Euro 2000. Went to the pubs and did all that. Soccer's great, and Todd's saying it's like the U.S. has made huge leaps in their play. Yeah. It's just like they don't have any striker type players right now, and I think that really hurt them in this group as we turn this from GPL into World Cup podcast.
The Mbappe for France. I saw he just took over the game the other day, and I'm like, wow. And I never liked the way France used to play in the past. Wasn't that? Then one of the guys got kicked out for literally headbutting a guy.
Zidane, I think. Zidane did that. Yeah, they had some weird players.
But then you look at somebody at Mbappe, and just like he's like 23 or 24, and he's just dominating.
Yeah,
just amazing. So, who is your pick to win the Big Ten? It's not Minnesota. They're coming after you.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It'd be silly not to pick Minnesota now, which I think was my pick before the season too. I think I had. Well, I pretty sure I went Minnesota, Michigan, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Penn State. I don't remember the rest of the order, but
because Vigs, you had it Minnesota. Notre Dame.
I had Minnesota. I actually had it Minnesota, Notre Dame, Ohio State, then Michigan. Oh. I'm surprised how good Penn State's playing.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised to see Michigan dropping games. I'm just not. I know they have a lot of talent still, but they have a new coach who has probably never gone through quite being the guy. It's very different being the assistant coach to all of a sudden being the head coach. And how that dynamic works. It's even harder when you go through a stretch like they're going through. Like, how do you handle this if you're Michigan? Because you can't just pretend that it's just like business as normal when you're dropping games like this. So how do you get through that? So I think that's going to be a struggle for them. I'm just surprised Notre Dame's not playing better. Ohio State, the whole Jager Joshua thing and said Loca, to hear that he called him Curious George on the ice, and for Ohio State not to come after him a little bit more and do something about it was kind of baffling. I don't know. Did you guys hear that part of it?
Yeah,
I did.
Yeah.
And that I don't know if I don't really want to say this because I don't know how I haven't vetted it or heard, but Ohio State claimed it was something else that he said. And it just didn't hold a lot of water. That what they claimed.
What they're claiming.
Yeah.
I'm curious if it was the referee or a linesman.
It was the linesman who heard it. And you could see on the video that the linesman then goes to the referee and they're talking.
Okay.
Then all four of them
Okay.
get together and start talking.
We see those two linesmen here a lot. They might even be working the games this weekend. So I might, if I shoot in the box, I might say, "Hey, what happened?"
Or if you happen to go to a certain establishment after the game on Saturday, you might get a better explanation, because they shared with Tony Scott what happened. So I'm sure they're gonna be fine sharing what happened from their perspective.
Yeah, well, we talked about it on the show. It's just like the fact that Jagger Joshua had to come out and tweet, had to really go public about it, because nothing had been done or nothing had been said. That's the sad part. It's like, if he wouldn't have said something, so Loco would still be playing right now.
Yeah,
nothing would have changed.
There were too many failures at too many levels in that whole situation. And I mean, at both schools, I mean, honestly, both schools and the Big Ten, in terms of, for some people, timing, for some people, just messaging. No.
Well, leadership.
Yes.
There's no leadership in this anywhere.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing for me. I mean, even if you do the wrong thing sometimes, just stepping to the plate and saying, this is what we're going to do about it, or this is something that happened that needs to be addressed. I mean, that's the biggest thing for me, is there's something that happens in a classroom and no one steps forward to point out that this needs to be addressed. That happens all the time in society. And to see it happen at this level is just like, come on, really? Because if there's one thing about like behavior, if you're a head coach, if you're a position of authority and you're just going to let it go, who else is going to step in? One of their teammates, one of the junior, newcomers. They're not going to do that if that's what their leaders are saying is the way to handle it. So it makes me get a little intense.
Yeah, it was. I mean, those few days where there was a lot to be angry about, and there still is. I mean, it shouldn't go away. I mean, it shouldn't. Nobody should get a pass because time has gone on.
We had Jack Ramsey on right after that, and he was very disappointed in the Big Ten, how they were so reactive instead of proactive, because, like you said, nothing happened. Even after Jagger first came out with it, it took him a couple days until even anything really.
Which was, well after things had happened and should have been addressed, or at least,
it was a week.
Here's what we're doing.
Jagger Josh was finally like, okay, I got to say something. And he did. Yeah. And then it blew up. And it's like, what the hell is wrong with these people?
Well, I mean, Todd, doesn't it feel to you like the Big Ten has a leadership issue for hockey? Like in the CCHA, Josh Fenton, very up front. You always knew NCHC hockey, anything, go to Josh. Now it's Heather. CCHA, anything goes on, Don Lucia. Pretty like prevalent presence at those two conferences. I don't know what it's like in ECAC or Hockey East, because I don't deal with any of that stuff. But the Big Ten, I mean, there are people that you can reach out to, but there's nobody that's really just like, okay, that's for sure the person that's in charge, and like they are going to stand up and they're going to say, this is what we're doing as a hockey conference.
It's the problem of having a multi-sport conference where you have to, in theory, Kevin Warren is in charge of that group, but we've seen him at hockey things. We, hear him talking about hockey occasionally, but I don't know how many days of the year he actually makes any decisions about hockey. And there are a couple of years ago
he asked his other people do it probably for him.
When a couple of years ago they brought in Red Berenson to be the I forget what the title is. And that's the problem. They gave him a title that no one really understood. And he was basically the conduit from the coaches to administration at the Big Ten level.
He was like the member at large for the coaches.
Sure.
Like if you had like a board of directors.
Coach at large, man.
He was like the coach at large. He was like, but that I think when the coaches at the Big Ten institutions got upset, they're not going to go to Red. They're going to go to their AD, and their AD is going to go to Kevin. That's just the way that power structure, I think, worked.
Yeah. And Red had could get Kevin Warren's ear on things. That was the fact.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't know, how much that's changed over the last couple of years. I mean, for a lot of years there was an administrator that was in charge of hockey at the Big Ten. It was Jen Heppel first for a bunch of years. Then it was Brad Traviolia. I've never pronounced his name right.
Sounds familiar. And
then Brad left or got moved out, and there was kind of a vacuum there of okay, who's the point person for hockey? It was a couple different people. Now I know some of the people in the Big Ten. They do really good work, but I think they're not given enough responsibility, enough authority in a lot of ways. Yeah,
I think it's authority. They're being given responsibility or being told what they can do, but outside of that realm, for anything that's not routine, right?
Yeah,
it's a bit of a vacuum in eggshells.
Yes. So I mean, I had heard that the statement that came out from the Big Ten on the Sedloka issue went through their crisis communications team first and was drafted by the crisis communications team, which is, as I understand it, an outside entity. So Big Ten has their own PR and a pretty significant, level of their own PR staff. But they ran that up the full, corporate ladder there.
Mm-hmm.
And it still was pretty far from sufficient. Yeah.
By the way, to our beer drinkers on the chat, this is very good.
I could hear you pouring some more.
FYI, people.
This is the challenge of having the being one sport of however many the Big Ten has now. I don't even know what the number is.
And it's just going to get worse when you add 2 more schools.
But I mean, ideally, Kevin Warren would just delegate someone in his office to be the person in charge, and right?
Sure.
If you're not going to pay attention,
which is what it was for years.
Yeah.
I mean, Jen Heppel would make calls. Everyone knew she was in charge. Brad Traviolia would, people had issues with him, but he was the one that, was making the calls for hockey in the Big Ten.
But I think that person has to be a little more out front as well, to me.
I think there are people in the Big Ten that agree with that. That say, if you put this person in charge, we go.
Yeah.
And it just hasn't been, I don't know if they don't want to do that, or if they just have found other ways of going around it, like with bringing in Red Berenson and thinking that's the way of smoothing it all over. That's only a small part of it, because you have to interact with the outside, not just the coaching staffs.
You'd almost think they would get embarrassed into doing this. I mean, you have a situation just like this that just went completely wrong. And you think someone there, maybe even a Kevin Moore's like, we didn't handle this. We need somebody who can handle this stuff, because they looked really bad. I mean, all the institutions in this look really bad. I mean, it was the players controlling the whole thing because nothing was being done.
Yeah.
And that's And that's where the reactive stuff goes. I mean, the Big Ten should have been involved the next day, talking about it, saying what's going on here, and the fact it wasn't until a week and a half later when a player shamed them did anything happen. That is bad leadership. That is not leadership at all. That's just, yeah.
I think it just exposes what's our sport that we follow so much and enjoy. I think it's tough for that, and I think it's tough for the fans of the sport. So,
yeah, that whole thing. I mean, there's a lot of shortcomings, and a lot of people, a lot of us. I mean, the media didn't follow up on enough on there to push for more answers. I mean, I'm still waiting for the. I have questions about this, and I wrote right back to the communications person for the Big Ten, and still waiting for the interview to happen. And
unless you were paying attention to that series, I mean, I didn't hear about it until Jagger Joshua,
right, same,
said something. I mean,
well, it's like Ohio State and Michigan State don't necessarily have a Todd or a Jess or a Schlossman or Matt Wellens. Like, that's why your local media is important to everybody. It's like, if you care about your sport or your team or something, it's important to buy those subscriptions or whatever to support someone to get those answers for you. And I just don't think those schools necessarily have that. Like, I don't think I've seen a Michigan State or Ohio State writer at Mariucci the last decade.
I don't think ever.
I don't know. I mean, the Michigan Daily, like, that's like Connor Yeargood.
Connor was there last year.
He's there for Michigan. I don't think the Detroit Free Press sent anybody to Mariucci the last decade. So it's kind of like that local journalism stuff. You really got to support that.
Thank you. I agree. And it's getting tougher.
We don't have it here. I mean, Jess is kind of that person now, but it had really fallen off for Minnesota. I mean,
yep. At availability today, it was me, Jess, Wally, and Frank, and Jim Rich ahead of a Badger series. Like, Pioneer Press doesn't have anybody. They will run some adjusted stuff here and there. Star Tribune didn't send Randy or Meg or anyone like that. Nobody there from WCCO, Care 11, KSTP.
And
so.
when we first started getting credentialed, Bruce Brothers was there every weekend for
Pioneer Press
many years. Strip had a couple of them, and then Roman was there for a couple of years for
and Jason Gonzalez, Don Lucia's favorite.
But I mean, that's also part of the local. That's also part of the newspapers and business, Todd. I mean, you've seen just shrink.
I mean, taking you inside our situation here. I don't know if I want to say this, but I'm not real confident in our paper's future coverage of hockey, to be real honest with you, because our traffic is just not there. And, you can say, the interest in the team is low. And so the interest in people reading about the team is low. Yeah, I get that. It hurts me, like personally, like on a personal level. I've invested an awful lot in this over a lot of years, and I don't like the way this is trending. And that is not great for an outlook in terms of, just putting the resources in to find the stories that need to be told, because you don't just show up and everyone gives you everything you need. Right. you've got to put in the work to find the people you can trust, the people you know that are going to give you items that turn into bigger things. And that's just so much harder to do with the staffing levels that we all have now. Yeah, it's not good. It's not getting better, but they're going to have to drag me out kicking and screaming. I'll tell you that much.
And, and essentially we don't, well, obviously with my site, there's not much money into it, folks. I felt there was kind of a hole there, and like, obviously that we have this podcast, quite a few. I mean, we still have 36 people listening at 11:30 at night because Strib isn't doing it. No one else is doing it. We do it. And we do it. We're mostly doing it for fun.
Mostly doing about because we care. And it's like, for me, like, I've always wanted to be connected to journalism somehow. It's not my day job. And, I had that athletic opportunity for a while there. That was a cool deal. And that kind of went away. I think partially like what Todd's saying is like the support isn't necessarily there for that to be a staple of their coverage. And, when COVID happened, people went away from it and didn't support it any longer. And so you just hope that support comes back. It's tricky with hockey. We've seen volleyball grow. We've seen wrestling grow. Hockey has not kept pace with those two sports. And it's probably falling down the pecking order in the Big Ten, at least behind those for coverage and eyes and support. So see.
I mean, the day I was there for that one media availability, it was you, me, and Jess.
Yeah, Jess has had a lot of one-on-one with Frank and Wally there.
Yeah.
So
and they're usually
I had to be there.
Observing, but we'll see what happens mid-January, because it is when football stops. I mean, Don used to say it all the time. He goes, football season, Viking season must be over, because all of a sudden people are showing up, for games and for media availability.
Do you see that with Badger hockey too?
I was just going to say, I give our TV stations here in Madison a lot of credit, because they've, and UW's done a good thing of doing Tony Granato and Mark Johnson that same availability. Just one-stop shop, bringing in a few players, bringing the coaches right in front of the cameras, in front of everyone. So they started doing that last year, and it was a really good move. But pretty much every week, all three TV stations are there, which is, obviously we don't have the pro teams to cover like you guys do in the cities, but so this is this in high school is kind of it for sports coverage here. But I've been pleasantly surprised with that, with the fact that there's that level of coverage. Now, that it's pretty much just me after games, but
that's kind of nice too, right?
It's all right usually. Yeah.
Gonna make sure mic volume is up.
Yeah. So sometimes I would love someone else to throw in a question, but
I'll try to get one in on Saturday.
Oh, okay.
So if I can catch him before he disappears.
Right.
All right, guys, I'm tired.
Okay.
I got to get the podcast posted, hopefully.
Are you going to be there both days there, Jupe?
That's
just Friday?
That's the plan.
Okay. I'm planning to be there just Saturday.
All right.
So Friday I'll be watching on TV and then tune into Facebook to hear Todd's post-game thoughts after the Badgers shock everybody with a big win on Friday.
Shock the world! You heard it, Viggs. Or folks, Viggs is saying Badgers are going to upset them.
No. I still think sweep, but it'll make for a better Facebook Live. video for Todd.
Yeah, I don't know. People get
If
riled
there's
up.
if there's a game for the Badgers to win, it would be Friday.
I think so, yeah.
And you should tell Tony he should start all Minnesota players on Friday.
Okay.
Just from me to him, my coaching tip.
Let's see. He's got the goalie. Got to put the two Edina kids in for D.
Yeah.
Stramel, Lucius.
Got to be another one, right?
Yeah, there's 7, and one of them is the third string goalie. But 7 from the cities.
Let me pull it up quick before Jupe shuts us off. Bantle. No, he's he's on
Alaska. Malmquist.
Yeah. Throw Malmquist out there. Show him what you got, Liam.
Healthy scratch last Saturday, so maybe not. But
all right, well,
although I think he's in the lineup.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I don't know. I just think it'd be fun. I probably just wouldn't put Garrity in goal.
Yeah, probably not.
All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the 35 people still watching us live this late at night. We always appreciate you watching. Cheers to all of you. Good night.